Hi, I'm Lauren, your host for the KidsMin Collective podcast, and today we are going to talk about the intersection between kids ministry and special needs ministry. So this is an important thing that we are seeing a lot more of in the church recently. A lot of questions keep surfacing about, hey, what do I do when I have a kid that might have potential special needs? Often we see this a lot in the early childhood age. Not that it is ever that it wouldn't ever happen in an elementary group, but likely you're going to see that a lot of times in about that 3-year-old age group. And so why does this intersection matter? Kids with special needs are often overlooked in ministry planning, and that is not always intentional, right? You develop programming and activities and think through these things that you're going to do in class and with your kids and with your teachers that are specific to the kids in your age group. So unless you have a child that typically attends that you do know has a special need, often you're not really thinking through that lens, and there's no judgment there, right? It is not that you're intentionally leaving somebody out, but we just don't often think about planning from that perspective. And so for every age group, whether that's early childhood or elementary, it is helpful to be thinking about how to include kids with special needs and be prepared for that. You don't have to go and prepare a bunch of things if you don't have those children in your ministry, but just be aware and be a place that welcomes and includes kids that are different and that do have special needs. So something to just be aware of, and especially if you don't have special needs within your church or your congregation right now, is to start having conversations. Bring it up in staff meetings. Inclusion is not just a program. Inclusion is actually a posture of the church. It is a culture thing. It goes all the way back to leadership and staff, whether they are, over community ministries, whether they are over kids ministries, youth ministry. It is something to be thought of as a culture shift within a church. And so I am seeing consistently that churches are trying to figure out, what do we do when kids show up and have special needs? And we see often that families that have kiddos with special needs are leaving, or they're not attending church because they don't have a place for their kid to be. And so as the church, we want to welcome kids into the church and love them. And sometimes that just takes a slightly different approach. And so this intersection between kids ministry and special needs ministry really is important. The goal of both of those ministries is to make the gospel accessible for every child. That looks different often for a child that has special needs, but it is important that that is the goal and the outcome, is we're sharing the gospel and we're creating an environment where a child can learn about that in a way that makes sense to them. And so there are biblical foundations for an inclusive ministry, right? We see Jesus's ministry is prioritized. He prioritizes the marginalized and those left out every single day. That's who he picks to be parts of his group of disciples. And so the scriptures highlight that God's heart is for all children. We see that time and time again as he's teaching in the gospels and just sharing that truth. And so we want to be churches that are inclusive and that do the same thing, right? We have a heart for all children. And so there are some things that are going to be some gaps probably between what you would have in a traditional kids ministry and a special needs ministry. And so that's a whole other topic. If you're getting ready to launch a special needs ministry, let me know. I would love to talk with you about that and brainstorm that. But I do want to highlight some of the differences between the two things, right? Often special needs ministry is going to require special needs ministry, it requires training for volunteers that are going to be specific to the kids with special needs, when just a traditional kids ministry doesn't typically need that. You train the teachers and you train the leaders, but that is going to look different to have a class of 10 first graders than it does to have 10 kids that have special needs. All 10 of those kids are going to have different needs, different abilities, different cognitive processing skills. That's just going to look different, right? Another difference would be that parents of kids with special needs tend to need a lot more communication, not because not necessarily because they need the communication, but it's a two-way street, right? They need to share, hey, these things are going on. Hey, we changed therapists and they're in a funk right now because it just looks different. But also that you need to be able to go to parents with kids that have special needs and say, hey, this thing occurred. How do you want me to handle this? What are the best ways to handle this? I'm seeing that your child is doing this. Is this something you're seeing at home? And it becomes a two-way street of communication, right? That is something that you do in children's ministry, but you see that in a whole other level and scale with special needs ministry. Often, kiddos with special needs are going to need environments that look a little bit different than what you might have in a typical kids ministry. And so a lot of what we do in kids ministry, it works for a lot of kids, but can be extremely overstimulating for children that have special needs, or kids that really thrive with a rigid structure or schedule. And so sometimes there's a gap and a little bit of a tension there, right? Typically, we have a much more one-size-fits-all curriculum and teaching methods in a typical early childhood or elementary KidsMin setting, when special needs might look very different. So those kiddos are going to learn in much different ways. You might have a fifth grader who needs to be taught the same way you're teaching a 3-year-old with very hands-on concrete activities. And so every kid that has a special need learns differently. So just keep these gaps in mind as you're thinking through as a KidsMin leader, how and what your strategies are going to be. So let's talk about a couple of practical ways that you can foster inclusion within your kids ministry, right? So we need to start with relationships. If you suspect there's a child in your ministry that might have a special need, or parents come to you and explicitly tell you, my child has a special need, or we're getting, again, in typically that preschool age group, you tend to see parents tend to see some developmental differences often between peers and their child. And so that might be when they say, hey, we're going in to get our child tested for whatever this might be. And so first and foremost, love those parents. Walk through that with them. You minister to them. Those mama and daddy hearts are just struggling as they're trying to understand this. And often there's a lot of grief that comes along with a diagnosis. They're probably not expecting it, unless they were told explicitly at birth that their child has a special need. So walk with them and love them. So the relationship piece is huge. So do that. Build a bridge of communication between families with kiddos with special needs and your ministry. And so it starts with the relationship. So building trust with parents, listening to their input. As parents come and say, hey, my child has a special need, remember that they know all of those details. They live with that kid all the time. They know what the triggers are, what the hard things are, how to calm them down, how to handle situations. So build trust with them, ask them questions. You can be honest and say, I don't know if I'm asking the right questions, but I just would like to know, what does this look like? How does this situation play out? And ask them questions to understand who their child is. So starting with that relationship is going to be foundational. If you can bridge the gap and say, I want to have a relationship, I want to partner with you as a parent of a child with special needs, they are going to forever be grateful for that. And so help them help their kids. So another thing you can do in your actual classroom and your teaching environments for your programming on Sundays is to offer flexible environments and spaces. So have a space that is a quiet space. If you have kids that get extremely overstimulated, it's going to be very difficult for them to be in a large group worship setting with 100 other kids. So just be cautious of that and aware of that. It's not that you have to change the large group worship completely because you have one child that has a special need. just be considerate of how you can include them. Sometimes it is simply enough to say, here's some noise canceling headphones that help dampen that sound for them. And then they are able to be part of that large group worship. Sometimes they can't. So you can be flexible to say, okay, we are going to not do large group worship, and we have a buddy that's going to step out with you, and we're going to have Bible activity time, or maybe they love a specific toy, and maybe for that worship time you get to play with a toy, or you do your own worship, right? Could you bring a small Bluetooth speaker that is much quieter music that isn't overstimulating for the child? So just be thinking of what ways you can be flexible, but also creative in how you're helping that child worship and be part of ministry and teaching them the gospel. So think about that. Visual schedules are often helpful for kiddos with special needs. So even if you can provide that in just up on a wall in a classroom to be like, hey, this is typically, the order of events. This is what a normal week looks like. The other thing that might be helpful is sensory tools. If they need any kind of, they need fidget toys or things like that, you can provide that. Training your volunteers on just some basic disability awareness and what to do if they notice that. You can handle this how you want. Typically, I preferred to be the one that had a conversation with mom and dad if I suspected some kind of a disability or a special need of some kind, mostly because I was going to be the one that was going to kind of bridge that gap with communication with parents. And at the time that I was on staff at a church, we had a special needs ministry. So I was going to be the go-between between both of those groups. And I wanted to be able to have those conversations in a way that loved and honored those parents. And sometimes, with every good intention, volunteers don't quite understand that conversation, and they may not, they may handle it slightly differently than I would have liked. So maybe that's a control thing on my end. I don't know. You may handle it how you want. If you have trusted volunteers that you think can handle that conversation, then great. Maybe you even have a volunteer who has a relationship with those parents, so they can have a conversation. But training your volunteers on what to do if they think that they notice some kind of a special need or a disability, and what the protocol is on your end. So do you want them to report that to you? Do you want them to have a conversation with parents? How do you want to kind of be in the loop on that? So just think through that if you don't have a procedure and a process for that. And then if you need to, you can assign a ministry buddy or a peer helper. Probably more so, peer helpers might be more in the elementary age group. A ministry buddy could be a student leader. Kids tend to love to be connected to student leaders. They think other kids that are older than them are super great. So that might be a good fit if you can find a student who is mature enough to kind of walk through and handle that stuff. So just be thinking about ways that you can foster inclusion. And then, like I said, the partnering with parents, this part is so huge. Parents of kiddos with special needs, they go in with their defenses up everywhere they go, because everywhere they go, they have to fight for their child. They have to fight for inclusion in a classroom. They have to fight for their medical needs to be met. And they continually are advocating for their child, which is exhausting. There's a lot to that. It's hard. It's complicated. It's a never-ending full-time job, in addition to caring for their child with special needs. And so one of the ways that you can, as a KidsMin leader, come alongside these parents is to tell them that I'm an advocate for your child. I want to partner with you. I want to help you. As a parent, I want to help your child. I want to create a space that's safe for them. I want to create a space that they can come to worship and you can come to worship. So reminding parents that that is your goal. It might not happen tomorrow. It might not happen next Sunday at church. It might take a little bit of time, but working with parents to set up a plan to make that make sense. So remember that parents are the experts on their child. treat them as ministry partners and not as like a problem to solve, right? Parents live day in and day out with their kids. They know all the ins and outs of the things that are hard for their kids, the things their kids love, what phases they're going through. And so ask them questions, let them teach you about their child. And then based on what they're telling you, then you can come up with a game plan for how that makes sense to bridge the gap between, what your KidsMin teams are doing and those leaders are doing and how we can meet the need of this kiddo with special needs. Keep communication at the forefront of this. Regular check-ins is super helpful for parents, not to just be a report of like, hey, this is exactly what's happening. We got the kid got in trouble. Like, that's not what we're meaning. Continually checking in. Those needs for kids change a lot when they have a special need. And again, the slightest change, first of all, you have to remember kids in general, if there is a disruption to the regular routines and rhythms, they don't know what to do. Like the younger they are, the harder that is to handle. And that is only made more challenging and difficult when you have a kid with special needs. So if any type of disruption occurs, and these can be good disruptions, right? Like a kid changes, like a transition from grades or a transition from, school year to summertime. Like those are hard transitions for kids. So continuing to check in with mom and dad, what are we going through? What are the things they're liking right now? How are they handling the change into summer, instead of a school routine? So just be asking those questions, be curious, and be willing to engage and make a plan with parents. And just be an encouragement. Again, like I said, these mom and dad hearts are having a hard time learning what that looks like. Sometimes they're grieving some of the things that are occurring, milestones in a child's life. And so be a spiritual encouragement, fill them up. They are drained. They're exhausted. They are full-time caregivers a lot of time. They're trying to figure out game plans. They're 100% advocates for their kids 100% of the time. And so there's a lot that goes into that. So just partner with parents, ask questions, love them well, meet them where you can. One of the best things that I could have ever done is I asked a mom who had a kiddo with special needs. I said, when are you available? And she said, well, my daughter goes to therapy from 9 to 10. And I said, great. I will meet you at a restaurant around the corner from therapy. You drop her off, you come to me, and you'll be 5 minutes from her, and we will have coffee for an hour. So we met, we had our coffee or our breakfast, and that was super helpful to just meet her where she was. And to do something that made sense for her in her regular schedule. So that is a great way to love on those parents. So the other big thing that would be really helpful is to equip your leaders and volunteers, not only for the conversation, if they suspect that a child has special needs, but also as they're creating the culture for their classroom, right? And the kids ministry as a whole. So we want to have a culture of curiosity and compassion for kids that might be different, right? Not just a culture of fear or hesitation. So just be thinking through that lens, and how you equip your leaders to think that way. You can do some different things. There's definitely some online Facebook groups if you wanted to join those for some online trainings or books, partnerships with local therapists or special ed teachers. These are great ways to just help equip your leaders. If you can find somebody who is a physical therapist, occupational therapist, a SPED teacher, special education teacher within your church or congregation, it would be great for you as a KidsMin leader to build a relationship with them. They see a lot of things. I am not an expert in this. I helped with the special needs ministry for quite a while at my church, but I'm not an expert in this. Those people are professionals in those roles, and they would be a great partner for you to say, hey, I have a question. Could you come? We had a special education teacher who would sometimes come and observe a child and say, I'm seeing these 3 behaviors, and I think these are the trigger points for them. Here's some suggestions on what you can do in order to handle the situation. So those are great resources if you can find some people in your congregation that could help with resourcing for that for you. And so just be considering how you can equip your leaders and volunteers. And so navigate the challenges gracefully, right? Things are sometimes challenging in this space. There's sometimes disruptive behavior. Sometimes you feel like you have limited resources. You're going to have to address concerns that aren't always comfortable, like safety of the child with special needs, safety of the other kids in the class. How do you do the programming for the whole class and have a kid that doesn't learn the same way? Like, what do we do about that? So talk through the progress you're making over the perfection and just start with the small things that you can do. Again, partnerships with parents are huge in this space, and just build those bridges between the church leadership at your church and the families. And so you're wanting to cast a vision for an inclusive ministry that starts from the babies of the church all the way up to the adults, and that we are, as a church body, we want to include everybody in worshiping, and that includes people who learn differently or who act differently than us, right? So we want to include, we want to cast this vision for an inclusive ministry across the board at our churches. And so just be thinking from a strategic lens, what would it look like to have an inclusive kids ministry, right? That's your role. So you can't change everything about how church leadership sees things. You can be an advocate for that, but you are in charge of KidsMin, right? So what does it look like to be a kids ministry that is inclusive, that allows kiddos to come that have special needs, that learn differently? What does that look like for you? So just be thinking through what that looks like for you at your specific stage of ministry, at your specific role, at your church. Be aware of kids that might be coming in that might have special needs. Be aware if you think that families aren't staying because there is nothing for special needs kiddos, and if you need to create that. So those are conversations that can be had as you're starting to think through this from a different level. So inclusion is a journey, and every ministry has the ability to take steps forward. So it's not all about, today we don't have the special needs ministry and tomorrow we do. It's not going to be that quick, and it's not going to be that easy. There's going to be a lot of bumps in that road, but that is a journey to go on, that you can create a space that is safe for kids for special needs to come, and parents are excited about bringing their kids. So, if you have questions about this and you want to talk through just that intersection between kids ministry, special needs ministry, if you need some extra equipping, you have questions, you want to brainstorm, brain dump, thoughts, want to talk through a specific scenario, I would love to do that. Send me an email at lauren@ozarkministryconsulting.com. I'd love to set up a time to chat and just find some ways to equip you. What are the things you're needing? What would be helpful? Just to chat through that and give you some valuable resources in that space. So, would love to just offer that. Also some great options you could look up. There's several ministries that you can just find online. Key Ministry, Key. And then there is a ministry called Joni and Friends, which is JONI and Friends. And then Ability Ministry. These are three great places to look for resources on special needs ministries. So Google them, look them up, but also I am more than happy to spend some time talking with you through that and helping equip you as a KidsMin leader to become an inclusive environment for special needs families. So I thank you for being here. Thank you for just taking the time to be part of our KidsMin collective space and listening to the KidsMin collective podcast. I wish you all the best, and I hope you have a great week. Thanks for joining me today on the KidsMin Collective podcast, where we're all about nurturing leaders and impacting generations. Before you go, I want to invite you to take the next step in growing your ministry with confidence. I've created a free KidsMin Leader Assessment designed just for leaders like you. It walks you through the 5 key areas: purpose, people, programming, physical space, and procedures, helping you celebrate what's going well and uncover where there's room to grow. Whether you're a brand new leader or you've been leading for years, this tool will give you a clear picture of where your ministry stands and where it could go with a little strategy and support. Head over to ozarkministryconsulting.com to get started. You'll find the assessment right on the homepage, quick, simple, and packed with insight. And if this episode encouraged you, share it with a fellow leader or leave a review. We're better when we grow together. Until next time, keep leading well, keep loving big, and remember, your ministry matters.